Thank you for having me on today to talk about my favorite subject, Visual Studio Scrum, the marriage of Scrum and Team Foundation Server. So as you mentioned, I am the president of Exsentient, and my home is Boise, Idaho, which is awesome because unlike the rest of the country, I'm having pretty decent weather here today. In my office, just talking into this microphone is great. Here's an email address if you'd like to reach me, richard@exsentient.com, and I occasionally tweet and definitely have some posts out there relating to Visual Studio and Scrum and everything in between. So let's get right to it here. I want to talk about Scrum very briefly. This is not a what is Scrum talk, but I will kind of set a standard level of understanding there in about 5 minutes. I'm going to give myself that time box to make sure we understand the basics of Scrum. Then we'll talk about Microsoft's Visual Studio Scrum, which is the new process template that runs in Team Foundation Server that implements Scrum, how to install it, and then we'll just go through in the form of demonstration the activities around setting up the collection, the project, what do you do during a new sprint, what do you do daily inside of there, and then how do you close down and complete a sprint. And then we'll end up with some resources, and as Amanda mentioned, go ahead and ask a question at any time, and it's her job to stop me, interrupt me, and I will address your questions, or we can have a quick dialogue about something. So here is my Scrum on a slide. This one talks about the Scrum process in that graphic. And that is essentially, if we start on the left-hand side here, somebody is asking the product, the software, to do something it doesn't currently do. Whether that's a new feature, a very large set of features, a requirement, a user story, a bug fix, a feature enhancement, a change request. I've heard the gambit of titles for that, but essentially in Scrum we have something called a product backlog, which lists everything you want the product to do, the software, that it's not currently doing. And then the Scrum team, that's the product owner, Scrum Master, and the developers themselves, the development team, get together at a sprint planning meeting and they see what they can commit to delivering from that backlog. It's the product owner's job to keep the backlog prioritized. The team can help with understanding the cost, the effort involved in delivering some of these features. And then the product owner says, okay, I want these priority 1, 2, 3 things delivered as soon as possible. So during the sprint planning meeting, the Scrum team collaborates. They discuss the effort involved. They discuss the risks, some technical dependencies. They write up a sprint goal. They commit to delivering that sprint goal. And then the sprint begins typically 2 to 4 weeks in length. As the sprint is running, each day you're having a daily Scrum, which is typically in the morning. The team stands up in a common area. 15 minutes is the limit. And we go around the circle and say, what am I doing today? What did I do yesterday? And what's blocking me or what's in my way? So the Scrum Master or the person that's assumed the Scrum Master role can make notes of these impediments and actually track those and mitigate them. When the sprint is winding down, hopefully the product owner has been involved and is seeing the increment of software being developed, likes what he or her is seeing, acceptance criteria is being met, the definition of done is being met, and it's actually demonstrated at a sprint review meeting. Stakeholders are invited, feedback is given, the increment is accepted or it's rejected, and the team celebrates that at a sprint retrospective or learns from their mistakes at a sprint retrospective. Sprint review is where you would inspect and adapt the product, the increment that you're delivering. Sprint retrospective is where you inspect and adapt the process. What went well, what didn't go well, and what do you want to change for the next sprint. And if that's a Friday, sprint 2 starts Monday. There's no error between the sprints. They're just end to end. Okay, I see a question over here. Let me see if I can pop that up. Questions? Nope, no question. Just something blinking at me. So enter Microsoft Visual Studio Scrum. Now Microsoft internally has used Scrum on and off different product teams over the last several years. Externally they've had a Scrum template for an older version of Visual Studio Team Foundation Server called eScrum. There are other third parties on the market that have made Scrum templates. But finally, kind of as a fusion of Scrum.org, the Professional Scrum Developer Program, which I'll talk about in a bit, and Microsoft and my company getting together about 2 years ago, we came up with this idea of creating not just a program and education and certification, but a new Scrum template as well. So it was by direct involvement from our group of instructors that Microsoft created this third process template. They still have their MSF Agile and MSF CMMI templates out of the box. This is a new one that came out shortly after Studio launched, and it is downloadable from that bit.ly address right there, which I'll show you that in just a minute. And it does a better job of mapping to Scrum than trying to do so with the MSF Agile template. Don't get me wrong, the MSF Agile template is a very mature process template. There are lots of good planning workbooks in there, Excel reports that you can use as a basis for doing a lot of reporting on your metrics. But it just doesn't do Scrum. It's using terms like user story and issue and iteration. So if you want to stick to using the Scrum terms, this is the template I recommend. Let me bounce over and actually show you this right now. The act of installing it is just downloading it, run the MSI, install the SharePoint stuff manually. There's a template there that will actually set up your processes project portal with the look and feel and the dashboards for the way the Scrum template defines it. And then we'll upload it into our team project collection. So let me just go demo this real quick. So I've got a nice clean instance here. If you have a look on my Team Foundation Server admin console, I created a new collection called webcasts, and it has no team projects in it currently. We're going to create one here in just a second. I've already installed the template. If you come out here to the VS Scrum template link, that bit.ly that is in my presentation, it's just out here on the Visual Studio gallery. You can see it's quite popular. It's been downloaded 58,000 times, and 4 out of 5 stars. A lot of good reviews in here, lots of good Q&A. You can tell the Scrum community is very interested in this template and improving it. So this is 1.0. There are some things in here you find in the MSF template that won't be in this template. And I've already downloaded and installed this. So we can come out here now to show you what it does here under my C program files in a folder called Microsoft. I always thought this was kind of confusing. Why not Microsoft Visual Studio or Visual Studio Scrum? But it's in Microsoft Visual Studio Scrum, and then here's the project portal template for SharePoint, and here's the process template stuff. Now what I want to do is upload this guy real quick. So I'm just going to copy that URL to my clipboard, save some time here. And now you'll do this from Visual Studio. So I've got Team Explorer up, and it's connected to the webcast collection, but there are no team projects here. Kind of a chicken and egg thing. What I need to do is upload the template first before I can create that first Scrum project. So Process Template Manager, currently I don't have it listed here. I've got these other 2 that are out of the box, but I will upload it, give it that path, and go ahead and select the folder, and it uploads it. And then if I'm going to be doing predominantly Scrum projects from here on out, I would make that the default. But I prefer this way of making it the default. Delete the other 2 templates, and there you go. Now it's the template that's default. It's also the only one. I'm not that much of a purist, but I do like to do that for demonstrations. This is the only template you'll ever need, right? Okay, so we've got that uploaded. We've got it ready now to create some team projects. So what we want to do is just create real quick here a new team project. And I'm just going to call this Tailspin. Tailspin Toys. And we're going to pick the Scrum template. In fact, it's the only template. What's nice is if you get to this screen on your TFS and you're thinking, where did that Hundhausen guy say to go get that? You can go to this link they give you right on the dialog window, and it takes you to a more generic process template screen, and then a link off of here will take you to the Visual Studio Scrum template. So if you forget that link, you can always see it later on. Next, yes, we want a SharePoint site. We want source control support, and there's the settings. Go ahead and click Finish, and this will go and create my team project for me. Okay, so let me get back to here for just a second while it's creating that project. Now there's 3 categories of work management artifacts in Team Foundation Server. There's the work item types, and as you can see, the types that are in the Scrum template are specific to Scrum. I see sprint, I see product backlog item, I see impediment. These are things right out of the Scrum guide, which by the way got updated today. If you go to scrum.org, you'll see the new Scrum guide released today, July 2011 version by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. So if you guys are definitely doing Scrum and following Scrum, you'll want to download that updated guide and have a look at it. There are some changes in there. There are some built-in team queries, an all sprints query, product backlog, there's sprint backlog, open impediments. Pretty much Microsoft gave you all of the kind of standard Scrummy queries that you would need. And then reports. Pretty much the only 3 reports that you care about from a Scrum perspective is how are we doing across the release, so that's a burn down report. How are we doing across the sprint? Now we're looking at tasks and hours remaining. And then what's our velocity been? So let's look back over the last, X number of releases or sprints and see how many story points, which are our abstract unit of effort we're using. How many story points have we been delivering per sprint? And let's say it's averaging 35 points. Well, then going into sprint 7, for example, not to commit to more than that or commit to less than that because you guys are going to be going on spring break or going on to training or something. So velocity is a way for you to kind of look at your historical speed at which you're delivering these business value items, these product backlog items, in a way to kind of say how can we use that as a gauge for what we can do in the next sprint. Now, not getting too much into process here, but if you're changing up the teams or if you're doing lots of context switching, you're alt-tabbing between projects, this will drop your productivity, as we all know, and it'll impact your velocity. So the whole concept of throwing more developers at a problem to make it, solved sooner is a bit of a myth. I mean, it will eventually work, but there is that forming, storming, norming, performing cycle that has to occur, and Scrum will light that up, and you can see your drop in velocity as you're doing that. So let's go and demo now most of these activities. So when you set up a new project collection, some of the things you're going to want to do is upload the process template. We've got that done. We're going to create a new team project based on that template. We've got that started. We'll go back and review that in just a second. And then we'll just go through what it looks like to set up a sprint, product backlog, prioritization, and just have a look at some of the tools and activities in Team Foundation Server that we can use for that. So just curious if there's any questions yet, or you guys are following along okay?
Hey Richard, there's no questions. There's no questions just yet that have popped up.
Okay, good. Then we'll continue. Okay, so we're back over here to Visual Studio, and my team project was created successfully. So go ahead and close that down. And over here under my Team Explorer, I've got my Tailspin project. You can tell right away if this is a Scrum project because right-click, New Work Item shows that list I had just showed you. There's my product backlog item, my sprint, my impediment. So we can see here that, yeah, this is a Scrum template, not the MSF Agile template. And not to get too much into the admin side of things, but I do want to talk a bit about security and the group memberships and the security permissions for these groups. I've already got provisioned here on my Windows a couple local groups just for this demo. One of them is Scrum Team. So I'll go to my groups here, sort it by name. I have a Scrum Team group, and this has my fictitious team. There's Alice, the business analyst, Art, the architect, Bob, the builder, Dave and Wade, the developers, and Scott's the Scrum Master, and Tony. And I should probably add in here Paula, who's my product owner. Check the names here. Go ahead and add that to the list. Now what I'm going to do is then map that Scrum Team Windows group into my team project, giving it a lot of permissions. So I'm kind of going after the whole self-organizing, self-managing team. So these guys should be able to do and touch everything in a team project. Because it could be that, Art may be the architect and have seniority, but on a Scrum team, he's just one of many people that can self-organize and do the work. So I'm going to take this group here, and I've also got another group called Stakeholders, which just has Jake the stakeholder in it. And I'm just going to map these in at the project administrator's level. So I bring this up, and let's go ahead and add in our Scrum Team group. Double check the names, okay, and then here's that. And I get a lot of feedback on that says, wow, you're trusting everybody on the development team to be a project admin. And I do this to illustrate the point that this is a self-organizing, self-managing team. And if you're going to trust each of them to be working on a common solution and delivering business value for the company, you've got bigger problems of trust if this setting here is in play. Now that said, you might have some people who are new to TFS and not realize that right-click on a branch and selecting merge can do things you don't want them to do. So there are times where you might want to have a lower permission group for the new Scrum team members or the contractors or whatever, but that gets into politics. I didn't want to talk about that too much. So I map in everybody here at the project admin level, and then for the readers, let's go ahead and bring in our stakeholders because we want them to have a look at the reports and look at the backlog, but we don't necessarily want them touching anything. So they're read-only, and now I've got my security permissions sorted out there. Now before we get too far down the road in our product backlog, let's set up some areas in our new team project. And areas are just the kind of functional areas or modules in our project. I should probably show you before I get too much further that the Tailspin Toys website is just an ASP.NET MVC app where you can buy model airplanes and rockets and helicopters, and it's got a shopping cart and checkout. But what's great about this application, it's got lots of room for improvement. A lot of dead links in here. There's some built-in bugs that you've got to write unit tests to find. It's a neat application to teach yourself ALM, or if you want to do any demonstrations or presentations. Tailspin is a bit of a brown field, and it's also a bit messy, so I love to use it for my demonstrations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to improve this website in some specific areas. So let's add these areas in real quick. The first one's going to be administration. So we might have some new features there for the admins to use. How about the community? How about the customer section? Yeah, I'll make that plural. Let's go ahead and have a marketing area and orders and products. So I'm just making this a real simple list. It's a flat list, but you could have a hierarchy here. Under community, you could have another level called, social media, Twitter and Facebook and all that goodness, and you can track bugs or new features, product backlog items in that area. So I highly recommend on team projects you spend some time working with the business to get a nice, understandable area hierarchy set up. While we're here, the iteration tab shows some pre-built releases and sprints. Microsoft went ahead and auto-created at a high level releases 1 through 4, and then within each sprints 1 through 6. Now some teams don't work this way. I know some teams that would call that sprint 7. Even though you're working on a new release, you don't reset the sprint numbers. Other teams like to reset it. Psychologically, it feels like you're starting from a green field. You're starting over at a new project. But you can certainly come in here and rename these things. You can come in here and add new ones. But what you've got to be mindful of is each of these sprint nodes here has a corresponding sprint work item over here. So remember, one of the new work item types in the Scrum template is a sprint, and they map one-to-one to each of those nodes in the tree. And if we bring this up, this is the great part about it, is it gives us a bucket to put start dates, finish dates, the sprint goal, and then later when our sprint's done and we have our retrospective, we can log here the retrospective notes and actually track what kind of new things we want to do. So we can say what worked well, what didn't work well, and what we'll do differently in the future. So we don't know our sprint goal yet, but let's go ahead and put in our start date, and we'll go ahead and start that today, and we'll say that we're going to finish this sprint in 2 weeks, so it's going to go till the 2nd of August. And then we'll determine the sprint goal in our sprint planning meeting, which is coming up here shortly. So save this guy, close it down, refresh my list. So just be mindful that if you do add a new iteration over here on the iteration node, that you've got to manually come over here and add a new sprint 7, for example, work item. Or if you rename something, you might come back over here and change the dates. Or if you remove something here, you'll need to come over here and remove the work items, which you can't do through the UI. So you would have to go to the command prompt and remove the work item that way. Okay, we're getting to the area here. We're going to create a quick definition of done, and then we're going to start managing some work. So in Scrum, there's this thing called the DOD, or definition of done. And what it is an auditable checklist that the team sets up to know when they're done coding a bug fix or a new feature. It's got things in there like all my unit tests pass, we have at least X% code coverage, everything's been code reviewed, it's checked in, it's labeled. So in other words, you're not done with that feature and ready to show it to the product owner at sprint review until the team has checked off on all of those definition of done items. Now, unfortunately, there's no first-class support for this, so I'm just going to bounce over here to the project portal because this guy created an adjacent SharePoint site for this Tailspin team project. And it's not a bad place to put documents or checklists or things like that. So I'm going to come over here to the team wiki. And in the wiki here, I'm just going to create a new wiki page. And we'll call this our definition of done, our DOD. And we'll just put in a couple real simple bullets here. One is everything's been coded, everything's been unit tested, and all new tests pass, and everything's been accepted by the product owner. In other words, the acceptance criteria were met. That's kind of an obvious one there. And then everything's checked in and labeled or branched or whatever your close down of the sprint or release configuration management looks like. Awesome. Let's create that, and now we have a wiki page that we can point stakeholders back to and say, well, why didn't you show me that feature? Your team told me you were going to have that new thing done, and you say, well, it wasn't done according to our definition. And they'll say, what definition? I don't know about definition. You can send them a link to this document, and yeah, we didn't have all of our unit tests passed or whatever. Okay, good. We've got our team project set up, permissions, we've got our areas defined, we've got some iterations set up. So let's go and set up our product backlog. And this is something that should not be a new concept to people. I'm always surprised when I go into an organization or a team and say, hi, show me your list of everything that this program needs to do but doesn't currently. And that's to include bug fixes, features, enhancements, giant ideas, small little typo fixes, and rarely do I find a team that's got all that into a central location. Typically it's like, well, the organization's annual directives come from Bob, and they're in a spreadsheet on his desk. The bugs are all over here in Remedy or Fog Bugs or TFS. The feature enhancements that come from the users, they just get deleted. We don't care about users, and so on and so forth. And I'm just always amazed that there's no one central place. In Scrum there is. It's called the product backlog. If it's not in there, then it's not recorded, it's not documented. That's not to say that things in there are always going to get implemented. There's a prioritization, a business value, an effort, and a cost that go into that list, and I'm going to show you how to put that together. I'm going to cheat a bit, though, for the sake of time. We're going to add some new work items using Microsoft Excel. And we're going to bring in a predefined spreadsheet just for the sake of time here. Let me just bring that up real quick. Okay, so this is an Excel spreadsheet that we can use to import work items in bulk. I call it the poor man's migration tool because you can copy and paste and you can run macros in here to clean things up and scrub things, and then when you're all done you can go over here to team and publish it back to TFS. So give me a second here just to get the columns sorted out the way I want them. So I'm going to go to a product backlog item type, so it'll give me just a list of those guys. And we're going to get title, work item type. Let's bring in our area path right here. We're going to bring in our description, HTML field here, acceptance criteria, business value, effort, and then we've got our other ones that were here already. So we'll click OK, and that just sets up the fields, the columns, if you will. And I'm going to cheat. I've actually got a spreadsheet already created out here under my demo folder. So I'm going to bring this up. And this is not a bound spreadsheet to TFS. This is just something that, you know, some people put together, and we're keeping track of these requests. So we can just grab this over to here, down to here, and let's just get the product backlog items, and we'll copy that. Using this magical clipboard thing, we'll paste it in here, and we'll say we've got our title, our work item type is a product backlog item. We've got our area paths here. That's why we set those up ahead of time. The description, acceptance criteria, business value, effort, state, reason, and who it's assigned to. And we'll go ahead and assign all of these to the product owner. And we'll publish this. So we're going to generate some work items there. And you know it's published because the status bar down here shows me that. Also, if you go back here to column 1, or column A, I guess, I've actually got some IDs in here, and apologies that this thing is so giant, but scroll down a bit and it'll get a little more easier to read. There we go. So these are the work item IDs that get created for us. Great. So let's come back here to Visual Studio, and if I run my product backlog query, yay, I have stuff. And you can see that these are all product backlog items, titles. All the priorities are extremely large numbers. The thinking is the smaller the number, the sooner you're going to want to deliver that. So the team at the start of each sprint starts with priority 1, then looks at 2 and 3 until they can commit to delivering that and no more for that sprint. So let's add another work item here. We're just going to add a bug real quick, and we'll just put a title in here. Shipping costs are not listed in final receipt. Okay, so we don't know when we're going to fix that, but we are going to assign that also to Paula, because she's going to give it a priority and an effort and severity. So this is kind of a high severity bug, and it's actually in our orders area. We don't know the effort yet. We're going to talk to the developers to play some planning poker or whatever and come up with an abstract cost in effort. That's not dollars or days or hours or ideal days, although some teams will use that. I prefer something very abstract like a story point, or one of my teams I work with is a pharmaceutical, and they actually use Vicodin as their unit of effort. The thinking is the really big features that they're implementing are going to be a lot of painkillers required to do that. So let's say our team whips out the planning poker cards, has a quick but very good collaborative discussion of effort, and it comes back that this thing's going to be a 5. So on a Fibonacci sequence of 1 to a very large number, we think it's about a 5. In other words, it's a similar sized effort fix to one maybe they did 2 sprints ago, and they were using that to relatively size this one. Awesome. Okay, so we've got that in here as well. We'll save it. We should put in the repro steps and system information and all of that. And by the way, if you are using Microsoft Test Manager, that's part of Ultimate or part of the Test Professional Edition, those fields here, steps to reproduce, system, and some of the areas in that, if you're running it testing off of a specific requirement, all that will be auto-populated for you. It's really nice. You can actually attach a video, a WMV video of the bug repro steps, so people can just play the video and not have to mock up an environment to rerun that. So I'm going to rerun this query, and you'll see now that bug is listed in here as well. And that's just the way Scrum is. Whether it's a bug to be fixed or a new feature to be added or an enhancement to be made, it's all in the backlog, and it's just prioritized. Oh, last minute thing that just came up. The stakeholder of the company would really like to add a Twitter feed to the homepage. Okay, and that's going to drop into Paula's domain. It is in our community social media area. We do some quick planning poker, and because all of our developers are very up to speed on social media things, it's a low effort, but a very high business value. And this is just an arbitrary number, 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000, 1 to 10, and it just gives the product owner a way to see what are the high-valued things versus the low-valued things. And obviously, high-valued things with low effort probably will be done earlier. No guarantees though. Teams may opt to take on riskier things, or if the team's not doing any Windows Phone 7 development yet, and they say, well, that's a risk. We don't know it, but we would like to start with a small thing, and we would like to put that higher in the backlog. So it's kind of a collaborative discussion. It may not have high business value, but it's got high learning value for the team to tackle some risky things early. So it will drive this backlog priority. And I'm decidedly not setting that priority because I want to show you a different tool here in a second to do that. But I'm going to put in a quick description. So as a visitor to the Tailspin Toys homepage, I want to see recent tweets about Tailspin and its products so that I know what the community thinks of them. Okay? I recommend that for every product backlog item in here is a short one-sentence description in user story format. So as a I want so that. And the so that part's nice because non-technical people will say, what's a tweet and why is this important? Oh, I see. It's so the community can see this and we can see what the community thinks about it. Okay, that has business value. Now you might then go on and flesh this out with acceptance criteria, like we want to create a Tailspin Toys account and tweet from there. So that's going to be the account that's being used for the tweets. We might want to show the last 10 tweets only. We would like to filter out, I don't know, any profanity. And we would like it to look and feel like the style of the homepage. That's it for requirements. I get into a lot of discussions about how Scrum and Agile really don't do requirements. And they do, but they do them as late as is responsible, and they do it as minimal as is responsible. And then let the team figure out the how. A lot of teams I work with, the requirements get into how are they going to do this. Those aren't requirements, those are tasks. And the team should be responsible. The developer should be responsible for the how something gets implemented. So this, create the account, show the last 10 tweets only, filter out profanity. Those all feel like good requirement acceptance criteria. This create sounds a little bit controlling, so let's use a Tailspin Toys corporate account, rather than Richard's account, because we all know Richard tweets a lot, and we don't want to just assume that's the Tailspin Toys account we're using. Great, so we save this and close this down, and we've got another item in our backlog. Now it's time to go prioritize them, and we can do that here, but it's a very painful manual process. If I change this one to 1 and there was already a 1 in here, I'd have to go manually change it to 2, and reordering all of these things is horrible. So enter a neat tool here called Urban Turtle. And Urban Turtle is a third party up in Canada. A lot of good, smart Scrum guys work there. And they have this add-in to the Team Web Access. It's nicely integrated, and it gives you planning and task board capabilities. It uses Scrum terminology, and it's kind of a preview into what you'll see in the next version of Visual Studio. If any of you watched the keynotes and some of the demos of TechEd 2011 recently in Atlanta, but a big part of the story of Dev 11 or Visual Studio Next is its support for Agile and Scrum. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'll pop back over here. Let me bring up my IE, and we'll bounce over here to the Team Web Access. And just Team Web Access by itself is a very powerful tool. It's a web-based team explorer, for lack of a better thing. You can look at work items, you can edit work items, you can look at source, you can get things out of source control. Can't check them in though. You can run builds, and then these two tabs here, planning board and task board, these are new. Those show up with the Urban Turtle. So let me come over here and connect to a different project. We'll jump into our Tailspin on webcasts. Just to verify, I'll go to work items. We'll run the team query product backlog. And yeah, that looks good. We've got our things in here we just created. There's our bug. and somewhere in here is our Twitter thing. Hopefully that's in here. Don't see it. Oh, there it is. Twitter feed to the homepage. Again, the priorities are all 1,000. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So we'll bounce over to Planning Board. And the Planning Board is part of Urban Turtle. It's a licensed product. You got to have your keys all sorted out. There's a trial period you can use. And just right away, it's a nice stack of things in the backlog. So we're looking at all product backlog items, tasks, bugs, impediments. You can say, I don't want to see impediments in here. I don't want to see tasks in here. I don't even want to see bugs in here. So you can turn off those filters and then the red thing goes away. Or you can say, I don't want to see anything in here, and awesome, we have no backlog because our software is perfect. Well, not exactly. We just have the filters turned on. If you want to just see the bugs, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and show happy path and sad path things, which are my terms for product backlog items and bugs. So one thing you need to do right away, and I should have shown you this over here, is whenever you put something into the product backlog, it's in a state of new. It hasn't been moved to approved yet. That gives the product owner the ability to track it, but leave it in kind of an iceberg state or an icebox state. Or you could even go from new to removed. That's a stupid idea, or we've already fixed that bug. Just make sure you put in the history a little note about that as to why you were removing it. But if it's just a matter of accepting it, the Turtle has some neat little buttons over here. You can just approve this and say, I approve that one. Yes, that's a bug, that's valid. We're going to approve that one. And then you can see right away that you're just going to see the approved things in here rather than all the noise. And then what we want to do is, I don't know, let's fix this bug first. So just the act of dragging and dropping it there sets the priorities. Now you don't see them on this screen, but if I come back here to my query and just rerun my backlog query, you can see the priorities all changed using this advanced Stephen Hawking math algorithm, so that it puts a lot of daylight in between each of the items in here for priority. I talk to people, they don't go base 1, they go base 10 or 100, and this thing's going base millions. So it's easy if you wanted to manually put something between careers and about us. There's a pretty big gap of numbers there you can pick from. Or you can just have the Turtle do it. So we've got here 2 or 3 things. We've got the business value of this, the effort. This is showing me that that's a high priority bug fix. So what we want to do now is maybe bring these guys in and choose to work on those during the sprint. So for our sprint planning, there's some certain activities you want to do. You want to set your sprint start date and end date, and after you've crafted your sprint goal, put it into the sprint goal. Well, we're going to do these 2 things. So what you can do is you can drag these guys just down over here to sprint 1. And then this one as well. Down to sprint 1 here. And then rather than showing all of the tailspin backlog, you can say, show me just the release 1 things, which sprint 1 and others are underneath there. You can say, just show me the sprint 1 things. So these are, expressions that will show you everything underneath that. So that way you can say, hey, release 1 went out the door last week. There were 6 sprints in there. You can highlight this and say, what went out the door? What were all the features and bug fixes in release 1? You'll be able to see that all grouped together here. But for sprint 1 specifically, we're able to see we're going to do a bug fix, and we're going to do this Twitter thing. So what the team will do during sprint planning is have a discussion and come up with a sprint goal. And our sprint goal, let's come back here to work items, and we'll run our all sprints query. So for sprint release 1, sprint 1, which starts today and goes for 2 weeks, our sprint goal is going to be increase awareness and quality of our product. Something nice and generic like that. And we can have a discussion, a long discussion about sprint goals, but what they're supposed to do is encapsulate all of the things the team's committing to doing, and then the team actually commits to the sprint goal. The thinking is, hey, what we do as software developers is very difficult, and it could be that even though we thought that that bug fix was a quick one or that Twitter thing was a quick one. It turned out to be a lot of work. So we weren't able to get both things done. We did get one thing done, and you know what? That one thing did achieve our sprint goal. We did increase the awareness and the quality of our product. Sounds kind of squishy, but that's how Scrum works. Is you define the sprint goal and then you commit to doing it. So now you've got your sprint backlog queries. So we've got our current sprint, and we run our sprint backlog query, and we can see here we've got these two things in priority order. And let's say that you know, we fixed the bug, so we can pop this open. We can say it's gone from approved to committed, and we've saved that and close it. And then we've gone ahead and we've finished that one. We finished it very early in the sprint. So I want to start to take apart this Twitter one. So we're going to go ahead and approve this guy and commit to it. Save and close that. And now what we want to do is we want to create some related tasks to it. So the thinking is this is the requirement, but now we need to create some tasks, and the team can create their own tasks and assign it to themselves. You can come up with the tasks at the planning meeting and just blast them in really quick. But on the planning board, you know, you've got this interface to use as well. I just love this. You can come over here and you can highlight this guy, and there's a plus sign over here on the right where you can add related things like a task. And we've got a task here which is to create the Twitter account. And this is going to be assigned to, you know, hey, Bob does Twitter, so Bob is elected to do this. And we'll save it. And then, you know, Bob, as he starts to work on it, we'll move it to in progress on his own instance of the Turtle or from web access in general. But what each team member is supposed to do is daily keep updated the remaining work. So it's an hour to do that. I just haven't done it yet. So the remaining work is still 1 hour. And you update your remaining work every day. All the team members do that because you're going to know today more than you know yesterday how long you have on some things. Okay, you always get smarter and more enlightened as the sprint proceeds. So that's why every day you go update the work remaining in hours now. It's not a squishy term like a story point. It's hours for how long it's going to take you to finish that task. And let's see here. We're going to show our related tasks now. And let's go ahead and add another one, which is going to be to create the Twitter, we'll call it the tweet control for the home page. And that's a good dev thing. So we'll give that to Dave, the developer, and save that. And then Dave would come in here and say, okay, I'm going to put that in progress. And there's about, I don't know, 6 hours left to work on that because I got to do some coding and some TDD and all of that. And then let's put in another task here, maybe for the testers. So we're going to create the test plan and test cases, and we're going to give that to Tony, our tester. Actually, I say give it to her. She's going to create this and self-select the work. Be careful about my terminology here because Scrum teams are self-organizing, so they would sign up to do their own work. And then maybe that's going to be 4 hours left. And then she can put in descriptions here, you know, using the similar agile testing approach, which is just basically as we did in the last release, whatever, just some notes, save and close. So you can start to see now that your sprint backlog is fleshing out here. You've got your PBI, you've got your related tasks, and you can see now how many hours are remaining, and this will show up in the burn down report. Those are available in here. Those are available in the portal. They're, you know, actually reporting services reports you can get as well. Now the task board is nice because the task board then looks at just the sprint, and it helps the team or the Scrum Master or the product owner see and manage the load during the sprint. So here we are in our Tailspin Sprint 1. We've got our Tailspin area. We've got a couple of our items up here. So here's the add the Twitter feed to the home page and our in progress guys. And then as you finish this, so maybe Dave or actually Bob creates the Twitter account, he can just drag it over here to done, and that will update all of the statuses, and that will update the hours, take the hours to 0 here. So if we come in here and actually look at this guy, all right, come here. We've dropped it, and I'll look at it this way. Let me go to my product backlog. Oops, not my product backlog, my sprint backlog. And if I go into this create Twitter account, you can see that it's been pushed to done. The remaining work has gotten blanked out, and you can always see, well, what happened? You can go to the history and scroll down here, and you can see that it went from in progress to done, and here are the specific field changes. Remaining work went to nothing. Reason, work started, work finished. So the auditing capabilities of work items in TFS, that all tracks in here. Okay, so you would continue using this task board then for the remainder of the sprint, managing your work each day, updating your hours remaining, and then as the sprint winds down, hopefully, these things are all coming over here to done, and hopefully you've got definition of done being met, everything's tested and checked in, and the team is happy with the quality. More importantly, the product owner is happy with the quality, and the sprint review then really becomes just a formality. So then you'd come over here and you'd open up this original product backlog item. It's not committed now, but it's done and it's been accepted by the product owner, and you'd save and close that. And then to properly wind down the sprint, you might do some additional things like, check in your code, label it, branch it if you're going to do any hot fixes, or if your SCM says to do that. But then just manage the backlog. Part of Scrum is keeping that product backlog in good shape. You need to spend a fair amount of time during the sprint looking ahead. So what other features are coming up, or what other bugs are coming up, and let's take our pack of poker cards to the product owner's office every Tuesday afternoon, and let's collaborate on what's coming up in the product backlog. And that's good because, hey, as a team, you might finish early. Our 2-week sprint here, we maybe finished this bug fix and added that Twitter thing, and we're done after 6 days. So what do you do at that point? You go to the product owner and say, hey, we need more work, and we know what's in the backlog because we've been looking at it regularly. So we're probably not able to get the next number 1 thing done, but number 2, if I remember right, was fixing some reports, and we can easily get that done. So you can pull that work out in priority order and continue to make the product owner happy. So kind of a review here of all the different things in Scrum and how they map to Visual Studio. It's a bit of an eye chart, so cover your right eye and read the left column, and cover your left eye and read the right column. But let me just go through here. I showed you a number of these things already. But the concept of a team is just the security groups in Windows and how you map those into TFS and what they can do there. So I have 2 groups, a Scrum team and a stakeholders group. Make security pretty simple, but you might want to ratchet it up a bit if you've got people that aren't trained. Definition of done, you need to drop it onto the portal as a document or a wiki entry, or make T-shirts for everybody, put it on the wall in indelible ink, whatever. A product maps to the team project itself, so Tailspin Toys, a website, I have a project called Tailspin Toys. The product backlog, there's a query in there that brings together all the product backlog items and bugs together that you can see and you can prioritize them. Acceptance criteria are just the optional fields on the, I shouldn't say they're optional. They're optional from TFS's point of view, but they're not optional for the team's point of view, because that will help them understand the requirement and help them size it correctly. You can also associate test cases earlier in the sprint and just put descriptions in there to flesh out those acceptance criteria as well. Releases and sprints are iteration paths with additional metadata on the sprint work item. If you've got a release goal or you're tracking release or sprint capacity, you need to put those things in another document. There's no first-class support in Visual Studio Scrum for that. The sprint backlog is a different query that pulls up the product backlog items and bugs that you've committed to doing in that sprint, as well as listing the associated tasks and also associated test cases. Burn down and velocity, those are reports available in TFS that show you how you're doing across your product release, across your sprint, and what your velocity has been. So you can average that and use it for prediction in the next sprint. Impediments, I think of those as bugs in the process, and they're just something that a Scrum Master might create. You might go to the daily Scrum and someone's talking about, well, my trial edition of SQL Server is up and I'm blocked from doing my work. So that's where the Scrum Master can say, well, let me handle that for you. And a good concierge type Scrum Master would say to install the standard edition of SQL Server for the team. And you can put in here a description, Dave is blocked on his work, trial edition, timed out, etc., whatnot. Put it in here as a priority and save that. And then there's actually a special impediments query that you can run and see, what are the open impediments. I think of that as the Scrum Master's backlog. Bugs, we all know what those are. Those are things that developers create. Okay, why they created them is a whole separate discussion. Retrospective then is, hey, the sprint's done, we shipped, we delivered, we made good friends with the product owner and the stakeholders. So to kind of close this down would be to come back to our sprint and bring up our sprint 1 here. And we say, okay, it's all done. Let's go to our retrospective tab. What worked well? Well, we built and shipped the 2 things that Paula wanted, and Richard and Woody didn't, throw down this sprint. They're becoming friends. Friendlier, if that's a word. Oh, there should be an I in there. Okay. What didn't work was the round inflatable balls that we sat on. Please tell HR not to make us use those chairs in the future. What do you want to do differently? Can we have this retrospective meeting at the pub? Save and close. Sprint's over. Notes have been captured. And last couple things here. Forget Studio. Don't be flaccid. If you're doing Scrum, do it. Take all the opportunities to inspect and adapt, not just the product, but the process. Make your team better. Find those dysfunctions and remove them. And don't be flaccid. I love that term. So here's your pop quiz. Well, what if you're not really done? Gosh, the sprint's over. We've sprint reviewed it. But someone looked down and said, oh, no, there's a code analysis warning. Someone forgot to sign the app with a strong name key. Well, according to your definition of done, no code analysis warnings should be in the product. So this is a great quiz. I bring this up during conferences and during my training, and half the room says, who cares, we'll fix it next time, just ship it. The other half is like, oh, no, what's the impact of this? Now we can't put that thing in the GAC, and now we can't, put it into our installer, and what's going to break downstream. So gosh, we shouldn't even have shown this. We need to go to the product owner and tell them that we're not really done and this can't be shipped. Another one, maybe not so hard, is what about the dialog window? You guys shipped an app with this dialog window, but looking at the buttons at the bottom, you got your apply and OK and cancel out of order. But you know what? The product owner saw that, either didn't know or didn't care the difference, and accepted it as being fit for purpose. Now, the fact that you can't sleep at night because you're OCD about that is irrelevant. The product owner owns the backlog as far as what gets prioritized. So a mature team wouldn't just go fix this at the next opportunity. They would bring it up, put it in the backlog. The product owner would own that, prioritize it. Granted, the effort would be like a half a point. It's just go in there and switch some things around. But would it? Is it going to break any UI tests that are looking for those buttons in certain places? Is it going to break your training videos that the guys down the hall created? Is it going to break your, documentation, arrows pointing at buttons, and now that's got to be done? So it may not be as quick a fix as you think. And with that, I'm done. I'll leave you with a couple notes here. The Professional Scrum Developer Program is a training and certification program by Microsoft and by Scrum.org and my company, where we do exactly this in a 3-day and also a 5-day format, where you'll work as a team on actual projects, solving actual problems, playing the role of team member. using Visual Studio Team Foundation Server and the Scrum template. So Amanda, with that, thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard, very much. All right, everybody, if you do have questions for Richard, we'll give you, we do have a few minutes left for him to answer them, so get them in now. While we wait, I'm just going to let everyone know what's coming up this week. We do have a whole lineup of webinars that are posted now through September. We have amazing guest presenters and DevExpress product training, so you can check them out and register at devexpress.com/webinars. Coming up this week, later today at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this week's Code Rush feature workshop, Super Sibling Navigation. Mark and Rory build MethodNext previous navigation providers that will blow your mind with their sophistication and usefulness. If you want to see how the pros extend Visual Studio live before your eyes, don't miss it. So that's in about an hour Pacific Standard Time. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, making money from free apps with the Microsoft Ad SDK. This is the final installment in our Chris G. Williams Windows Phone 7 webinar series, and that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. All right. So, Richard, I don't see any questions that have popped up. You were obviously very thorough.
I guess so. I anticipated them all and answered them ahead of time. Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I like it like that. All right. So, everyone, you can see his final slide, his email, website. Get in contact with him if you would like to. So again, if you missed anything from this webinar or you want to review any previous webinars, please visit us on the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. Again, thanks so much to Richard Hunthausen. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for choosing DevExpress.